Okay, so first of all, I'm going to create a project, and I'm going to call it Distortion, because that's part of what we're doing today. Okay, and then remember to make sure it's on prompt for location. And I'm going to hit create. We want to put it on the projects drive. So projects, and then create a folder with your name on it, or your group name, and then put your project in there instead of putting it on the desktop. And this is my project. Right now we're in mic instrument 1 and audio file. So what I could do to start out with, take my microphone here, and we could disconnect the cable in mic instrument 1 and plug this cable in. And then I can record enable here, and then I've got my gain to turn up. Test, 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 test. Get a sufficient amount of gain where I'm not necessarily distorting yet, and it works fine. Okay, in 1, and we're going to hit 3 for record, right? So 3, and now we're recording. So everything's fine, and the levels are good. You can see I've got a nice level there. The ideal kind of level that you want for recording is about 2/3. Okay, there's some people out there that will try to tell you that you want it as hot as possible, but if you go too loud or too hot, you risk distortion, which is what we'll show in a second here. And if you go too low, then you got more your signal to noise ratio, so the noise versus signal. There's more noise in comparison to signal if you go too low and then boost it up later. Okay, so you want to be a nice healthy range, which really is about 2/3. So you can see my meter here, and I'm hitting pretty consistently between 1/2 and 3/4, which is like the 2/3 average range. And the same thing here, you can see I'm hitting about, that's about 1/2 right there, and if I get really loud, it gets up towards 2/3 or 3/4. Okay, so that's kind of the range. And there will be people that will say you want to be at between -10 and -20, which is basically saying the exact same thing. That's the 2/3. Okay, you want a good healthy level. Now, if we turn this gain up more, and we just keep getting louder and louder as we do stuff, and I'll turn the volume of the speakers down a teeny bit. Eventually, you can see the meters start to get more orange, and then they actually get red. And the red means that they're actually distorting. So you see how there's that buzziness that happens? That's distortion. And we'll see, and I'm just going to keep turning up louder and louder. We'll turn the speakers down more and more. And that distortion is just going to get worse and worse and more buzzy and nasty and beautifully disgusting. And you can see how bad that looks in the recording there. Can't you understand everything I say just fine, right? Okay, so yeah, that has a very distinct sound. It sounds disgusting. Okay, and that's all, right now, it's all because I've turned my mic pre-gain up too high, and so it's distorting. So if I turn this down, I'm still clipping, and now they get back to the original level I was at, and now I'm in a healthy 2/3 range. So that's where I want to kind of be. Okay, now let's check it out. Let's listen back. If we take a look at this, see I've got a nice level there. The ideal kind of level that you want for, and that sounds all beautiful, you know, my beautiful voice coming right back at me. You want a good healthy level. Now, if we zoom in on some of these, you can see this nice round curved waveform, right? Okay, and there's plenty of room for it. Even the spots where I get louder, it's nice and rounded. But as we start to push it harder, see they start to get bigger, but they still look nice and rounded. And then even that is still nice and rounded.
We will
There's a little bit of distortion in there, but not too much. But then as we get louder, you can see that one a little bit, but definitely here. You can see that we're reaching the edge. You see how all of these peaks are the same exact level there? That means that they hit some kind of wall. This is your ASMR for distortion. There you go. That's your square wave distortion, which is what we're hearing. And that's because the wave just basically hit the top and it couldn't go any further. And so just flattened out and then came back down. And that creates a square wave, which a square wave has all these harmonics to it. And so that is the buzzy sound that you get from distortion, or those harmonics and stuff. So you see that total squaring? It's just really disgusting. Right? Okay, so that is kind of the sound of distortion. Now this is not quite. Yeah, I mean it is like digital distortion. It's not. So it's not very pleasing sounding. Okay, and because when you hit that top, it's just unforgiving. It just chops it off. Okay, there's other kinds of distortion that happen in an analog circuit that actually can be kind of pleasing, and that's what guitar amps. You get distorted guitar. It's doing the same thing as this, but it's actually doing it in a way that creates a more pleasing sound instead of this really kind of disgusting kind of sound. Okay? We're going to disconnect from this one, plug it back in, remember. Okay, and we're going to plug into the warm audio, WA73 EQ, which is on input 4. So we'll plug into the front there. And then we'll make sure to change the input of this track, this second track, to analog 4. Let's see if this works sometimes. Yeah, that works. Okay. So now, we're not going to do the gains up here. We're going to do the gains on this unit here. The way this unit works, you have an input gain, which is the red, and an output gain, which is this gray. And the cool thing about this unit is we can actually decide to distort it on the device. So now we get, see that? We hear that same, here I should actually, hit record. So there's that same kind of buzziness, but this time it's not quite so disgusting sounding. It's still kind of disgusting, but it's kind of cool disgusting. Okay, and you can back it off a little bit. Let's see if we can test. See, that's not, there's a teeny bit of it in there. And this, like, slight distortion is often called saturation. You're distorting, and what ends up happening is you're only distorting some of the harmonics, not necessarily the fundamental yet. And so it kind of changes the color of the sound by just distorting the harmonics instead of the fundamental. And so, and that's kind of really what saturation is. Once you distort the fundamental, it's really full-on distortion. So let's bring that output down, and we'll turn the gain up a little bit more. And every time we turn it up, there's a little bit more of that distortion or saturation. We can turn this down even more, because you can see on the output it was going red, and when this goes red, we are clipping the input there. So we turn that down so it's not going red, and now our recording is not going to be clipping on there. And you can see that it's not such a solid straight line. There's kind of a solid line-ish happening, but not quite to the extreme of what was happening before when we were distorting the actual input. Now we're just distorting inside of that unit. And so there's kind of a faint line you can see down there, but it's still not so extreme as that other one. And once we can turn this up, like turn up the speakers here, you can hear that it's not quite so crackly, buzzy sounding, but it's still distorting. You hear that distortion, it's just not so disgusting.